The COVID-19 outbreak in 2019 affected millions across the world. We have all had to adapt to change in an attempt to survive in a new environment. This new world with COVID has introduced many restrictions and regulations that have been necessary to reduce the risk of the virus and ensure our safety. Masks, social distancing, and online technologies have become the new normal. For student athletes, COVID has really made an impact on their training, education, relationships, and even identity, as they have had to combat living in a world with COVID. Here, we give them an opportunity to share their story and experience.
I'm Tristan Nickerson, and I'm JU men's rowing team.
My name is Paula Trajolerdo. I'm a senior in golf, but I'm doing my MBA this year.
Hi, my name is Olivia O'Leary. I'm a sophomore on the women's lacrosse team here at JU.
My name is Jose Manzo. I'm on the men's soccer team. I play right back / right wing, and I'm currently a 5th year doing an undergrad in marketing.
When athletes first heard about the virus, their first thoughts were that of shock and disbelief, and none could imagine or prepare themselves for how the virus was going to impact them.
First found out about the coronavirus on the news, and I kind of figured it wasn't going to hit us. We were in our spring season, so it wasn't our competitive season. We were training, getting ready to play some exhibition games with schools around the state, and all of a sudden we come back from spring break and we're told we're not coming back to school. Everything was online, and from there our training schedule got canceled, our games got canceled, and we all remember that.
We started hearing about all these other schools starting to close down, like our games were getting canceled. We didn't really kind of know what was going on because COVID wasn't like big down here, like no one had really heard much of it, but there was a lot of like hype about it up north, so we were just kind of like, okay, like we'll just keep going, like next game, and then the next one got postponed, and then after that we kind of realized like that was the season wrapping down, and I think it was a bit of a shock to everyone, especially like for our seniors.
I think it was Thursday of spring break, and coach had walked in that day. We had weight session in the morning, and it was the afternoon practice, and coach walks in and he was like, I want everybody to take a seat. And we were like, oh no, this is not good news at all. So everybody sits down, he walks in, our athletic director walks in, and another member of the athletic department walks in as well, and it was like pretty much straight to the point. They were like, all right, basically the season's over. Coach, he got choked up and everybody just lost it. And then he was just kind of like, all right, we're gonna do one last thing. We all got into some 8s, random mix-up lineups. We did a 500-meter race, and that was it. That was the end of sophomore year.
Well, we were working on the players during our spring break, and we just got a phone call saying the players were over. The players one of the biggest golf tournaments for the guys, and we didn't know what to do because we were still in season, and we play both seasons, so that was one of our biggest seasons in spring. So we just come back home. Coach said we will have 2 weeks until we figure out what to do. So I stayed here for the two weeks. We were able to still practice and everything, but the tournament started getting canceled until we decided to go home. It was not worth it staying here without practice or school.
With the rapid spread of the virus, not long after receiving the news that athlete seasons were cancelled, all were sent home. Being sent home early would mean that student athletes would have to complete the rest of their semester online.
I think it was easier for those who live in the country or in the state. I know internationals had 48 hours to pack their things and go, so that was kind of tough, but it was different because on such short notice and kind of having training and games and for graduating seniors, graduation in mind, it was kind of different.
I'm from Mexico, well, staying here without school or practice, I didn't really see the point. I feel pretty lucky that I never had restrictions of coming back or going home. So basically, like when all the COVID started, everyone was freaking out, and they were like, well, they're gonna shut my border in 1 week, so I have to pack everything and leave. And I was pretty chill because I didn't have that problem. I knew I can just book the flight anytime I wanted to, same as coming back. So I felt I was pretty lucky with that.
The difficulty of attending school virtually was a challenge for most student athletes. Firstly, all had to complete the rest of their semester finals virtually, and for international students, the time difference was an additional issue.
It was hard. The books weren't able to get all the way home, so I was pretty much learning what the professor was saying, so learn by myself. We had some group projects, and it was pretty hard because I was in another country. They didn't know me, I didn't know anyone, so it was hard working as a group when you're not there. So I find it a little bit easier getting here and studying. I feel like I learn way more in person than what I can do online.
They would have to train individually, and for international students, have to face the extra stress of flying home with the threat of COVID and the fear of not being able to come back into the country.
I was not coming this semester. I was going to stay at home because everything was online, and I was like, well, it's going to be harder, but I'm better at home. A lot of our kids didn't come back because it was so hard coming back. There were a lot of, as I said, we have a lot of international thing. We're the team that has more international kids. We lost 2 girls on our team and 1 guy on the men's team. We have a guy from Dubai that he's not even able to come back, not because he doesn't want it, it's just Dubai is not letting one get out of the country or come get in the country. So I felt that was, we lost so many girls on the team and some guys on the men's team that were pretty good.
Student athletes also had concerns returning to school with how classes would be run and if the new protocols put in place would be effective in ensuring their safety.
Everything's obviously a lot different than we remember. Our classes went from small to smaller, so half of us are online, half of us are in person, and then we switch on the following days. As for the team, there's only 4 of us allowed in the locker room at one time, and the weight room, same thing, just lifting with masks on, which may be a little uncomfortable, but I think we've all gotten used to it by now. But I think the school as a whole has done well to create a safe environment for us to go to school, to train, to play, and I think students in general, not just student athletes, are doing well to keep themselves safe and not put themselves in risky situations.
Definitely with COVID, like some of the setbacks have been just like the idea that we can't necessarily like hang out in like as a whole team because that's over the 10-person rule. So like it's definitely difficult just because we are such a close team, and it stinks like not being able to necessarily be together when we all want to be. But I think our team's done a really good job of adjusting to it. And then other setbacks have just been like, you know, with contact tracing and people put in to quarantine because of that. Like it's made like the numbers at practice go down a bit, like participation wise. So like, you know, it's hard on our bodies, but it's also good because we get those extra reps, like if you aren't being like put into quarantine. And then I think COVID in general has made like, since there was so much time off, like people are susceptible to injuries coming back into such a high level. So we've definitely had some issues with injuries, but we've been like working hard to like rehab those injuries, and like the trainers are doing a great job of like making sure everyone's still like safe and like going hard and being safe while they're doing it.
Athletes who were sent home were unsure of whether they would be able to return to school or if they would be able to compete upon their return. This had an impact on athletes' motivations while trying to train individually with no confirmed goal in sight. It was important for each of them to stay accountable, especially for those in team sports, as they tried their best to envision a regular season even in a time where COVID made it appear unlikely.
I personally felt pretty motivated going back home because it was like everybody was right at the peak of their freaking athletic performance. So, you know, that was how I felt. Some of the guys, the seniors even kind of felt motivated even though they weren't coming back, but some of the guys were just kind of like, you know, whatever, man. Like we have like a long, like our summer is like, what? It was like an extra month longer, wasn't it? It was like an extra month longer, and they're like, we got time. And a lot of guys waited to the last moment to start working out and stuff, and it was just kind of like, nobody really cared too much. We came back this year, and everybody felt pumped to come back, but there were so many different like changes and stuff to the team that it was kind of like weird. It was just really awkward. I feel like a lot of guys holding themselves accountable was a little hard during the beginning. There was a few guys that missed a few practices here and there just to sort of get themselves back into it. Originally, when we first came back, was starting on ergs, and we were on the ergs for most of the time before we could go out on boats. And I think everybody knows that rowing specifically is the best when you get to go on the water. So it was kind of hard for everybody to sort of motivate themselves to keep pushing it when we were on the ergs all the time. But then once we were able to get back on the water, it was a lot better.
I think it is really difficult when you do have to do things on your own, because there's the idea of like accountability when you all are like together and you know that like you're working towards a common goal, but the goal was taken away of like championship weekend. Like we didn't know if we were going to be coming back to school. Like it was like, when are we going to start school? What are we going to be allowed to do? Like, are they even allowed to like fitness test us? Like I know that was like a little bit of like a little rumor going around, like they aren't allowed to do fitness testing. So like when you don't have like some set goal, I think it's hard to like work towards something that you don't know what you're quite working towards. Like, it's more of like you just have to like look forward to the bigger picture as opposed to just like what's right in front of you at this point. So our team did a really good job as a whole of staying accountable, because we did like little challenges like during the beginning of quarantine, like, oh, like try to run this many miles and stuff like that. But then I think people saw it as a really good opportunity. Like, we did have such a long break that it was a time to take advantage of. Like, if you wanted to change up your nutrition, to like change up your body type, like you could do that. Like, you had so much leeway because it was on your own. And then I think we all came back really hungry because we knew how strong of a team we had last year, and we didn't want to let that go to waste. So we were trying to take advantage of all the people that we have still on the team, and like we know how strong we can be. So that's definitely a big factor.
Training during the quarantine, kind of with limited resources, it was new. It was kind of a new sense of accountability to, you know, I can run, I can lift, I can work on my technique. It might not come to fruition this week, next month, next 3 months, but knowing we were going to come back in the fall, I think was a big motivation for us all.
Over break, student athletes and coaches had to adapt to a new style of training and communication. Zoom was a very popular app that was fully taken advantage of during the COVID pandemic. Zoom meetings were a way to connect with teammates and coaches to keep up to date, share expectations, and feel the heartbeat of the team during a time of isolation.
To try to like combat the idea of like isolation and like self-isolation, we do team Zoom calls, and we still sometimes do them, especially with team sports. Like, you always rely on like having people around you, and when you're stuck, like being told like, oh, like you can only be in your house with your family, like I think that's like kind of hard to like wrap your mind around, that you like can't see your friends. But I think we're very lucky that we do have like technology that we can like FaceTime, or like we can still text each other and like that type of thing, so just so that like we don't have to be in a room with so many people, because like if you don't have to, like why do it at this point and risk anything? But like we would do like fun games and like fun things on the Zoom calls, like so it wasn't all so serious. Like we've done like we did like a draft pick for like our Olympic teams, which was like a really big like tradition on the lacrosse team here. So we drafted like the incoming freshmen onto our teams, like based on like we want this person for this, like, and that type of thing. And then we did like team scavenger hunts, like you have to get up and find like a highlighter somewhere in your house, and whoever comes back first like gets points for their Olympic team. So like we kept like the competitive spirit alive, but also kept like the social interaction going. So
we would do team Zoom workouts, if that would make sense. So a lot of like cardio-based stuff, body weight exercises. I know Big John and the coaching staff were very helpful in giving us home workouts to try and simulate things we would do with them, like filling suitcases or backpacks with books or clothes and making them heavier, and lifting that was some things we tried, and they were very helpful throughout that time.
The strength and conditioning staff also had their own set of challenges during COVID. With training facilities and gyms shut down across the world, strength coaches had to be creative in creating training programs that athletes could complete on their own to best prepare themselves for the possible season when no one knew would start.
COVID has been an experience it's kind of a blessing in disguise for us in terms of, you know, a lot of our athletes over the course of the summer during that quarantine period didn't have access to a lot of gyms. So it really allowed us the time to really look at the individuals, look at our athletes, how they move. So it made it really difficult to program. But what I did with my athletes is I had them send me videos. So what we did a couple movement assessments. We did specifically an overhead squat assessment. Therefore, I can see where my athletes' weaknesses are at, and that's what we really worked on over the course of that break. So it's more of a individual-based training program at that point in time.
Colleges across the United States tried their best to adapt their campuses to protect themselves against the coronavirus. New measures and regulations were put into place that were considered not only cautious but necessary in creating a safe environment for faculty and students. For student athletes, not only did they have to train differently during the break, but they had to continue to train differently upon their return due to the measures taken by the university.
So the committee that the university has put in place, the RPR committee, We were actually a small part of that over the course of the break, and they really, within the scope of what the NCAA standards are and the return to play protocols that we had in place, we were fortunate enough that that committee allowed us to have a little bit of free range, depending on the team, depending on our athletes. So I'll give you an example. We used two different conditioning tests for my soccer teams, in which we use them more as an assessment. And what those protocols gave us is that it allowed us to find a threshold that our athletes were able to withstand, and then everything was based off of that. It was a certain percentage of that daily volume. So we have our polar heart rate systems, which measure their total volume, and then also different speed zones or different intensity zones that they were able to work out, and that's how we monitor them on a day-to-day basis and then progress them week to week into that chronic workload.
The thing that I was most frustrated with COVID was not being able to jump right back into the training. We sort of came back and we stayed in 8-hour weeks for a long time. We weren't able to go on the water a lot, so we had to spend a lot of time on the ergs. And I think the thing that ruined it mostly for us was just trying to find that self-motivation and that self-grit to get it on the erg, because the erg is just kind of like the monster of rowing. So it was kind of rough for the first 4 weeks just spending time on the erg and not necessarily getting out on the water when it was perfectly flat days. Most of the time with training in COVID, we have a lot of time with masks, which really sucks, especially in the weight room. So the thing that sucks the most is just like the sweat as it builds up in the mask, and breathing in the sweat plus the mask is just super hard. You always just want to rip it off your face because it's just disgusting and gross, and then when you get done with your weight session, you're walking around with a gross mask. The biggest thing I missed the most was having 4 or 5 eights out there all together just rowing on the water. We don't get to do that anymore. The most we'll have on the water in terms of eights is, well, for my group, it's just 1 8, a 4, and some doubles and pairs. So I really do miss having all the coaches out there, all the athletic staff out there, and just all of the boats just going all together.
For me, that we're a small team, we have to get our temperature tests all the time, same as all the athletes, but we're allowed to hang out with just our team, that guys and girls are 12. We're not allowed to hang out with anyone else. So I feel like we're pretty restricted with who you are, so you don't get COVID and then everyone on the team get it. We're allowed to practice, but just with us, not do that much. So I feel like we're pretty locked down here.
Our team has been putting in a lot of extra work, whether that is going out and running on our own, hitting the wall, playing wall ball, doing extra like shooting, fitness, that type of stuff. And I think it has to do with like the coaches are so motivating for us. We want the best for like our teammates. You're doing it to not only help yourself, but to like help everyone else excel. And I think with how we did have such a long break, like with being sent home, there's so much that you feel you can make up for. Like you don't want to miss out on any more opportunities anymore, because we know what it's like to be taken away. We did have like a few people put into quarantine, so it did make practice very difficult on the few people that were here because of the less number of people. But it was also a really good opportunity to use that to like, because the quarantine people, it was a lot of upperclassmen, so the underclassmen were able to take advantage of that and like really use it to get reps, so that when the upperclassmen came back to practice, the level was set a little higher, and then the work ethic was set higher, and everything was set higher. I think in overcoming those like little obstacles that we had and like the little hiccups during the fall, like when the people that were quarantined came back to practice, it was like we hadn't missed a beat. And I think that was something really neat to see, because it showed just how strong we were like mentally as a team, because we could have easily let that like throw us off. And it also showed how like strong we were physically, because people's skill levels still stayed really high even when they were only able to do like limited stuff like with what they had at home.
The coronavirus was a rapidly spreading, mysterious and dangerous disease that impacted millions of people worldwide. Specifically, COVID-19 took a toll on student athletes, coaches and fans in a way that couldn't have ever been imagined before. The virus was unfair and unforgiving, affecting not only the physical, but athletes' mental health as well.
Like COVID did play a really big role like in people's mental health, like in like either a positive way or a negative way, like depending on like what was going on in their life. And so I think like that's something that's not really talked about. I think it did just play such a big role like with mental health, because a lot of athletes, like, sports is their identity. Like, that's what they've always grown up doing. And like, when you're told that you can't do what you've always done, like, that is just like kind of like rocks your world in a way.
I think JU was super lucky because most of our teams we were able to open up to stuff. Upper northern schools, they got completely locked down. There's a lot of different Division I athletic rowing teams that got completely shut down, and some lightweight programs that got completely shut down pretty much forever. So I think we were really lucky to be able to come back and bring all that we have.
Last summer we all came in July 1st. We got to know each other. Played some impromptu games amongst each other. We would lift together, so we got to know each other a lot more going into the season. Obviously with COVID we weren't able to do that this summer. The friendship process probably took a lot longer, and getting to know them. And
regardless of all the coronavirus has taken away, all that athletes have endured, and all the obstacles that have been put in their way, student athletes move forward. They each find their motivation, dedication, and commitment to keep going even when faced in adversity.
Personally, for me, like, coming to school and like playing lacrosse right now is like the most normal that like I've had, like, feeling that I've had in a while, like, and so I think it'll just be exciting to kind of have that like normalcy back, in a sense of like, oh, like, it's game day, like we get to say that again, which is super exciting. And even though there might be like little hiccups of, you know, like, we don't know what's going to happen if someone on another team tests positive, and like, what does that mean for us, or like vice versa, but I think we'll just take it day by day and see how it goes.
So regardless of COVID, like, really the greatest thing that we get to come back to is the team. Like, I'm glad that it didn't get completely canceled. I'm glad we were able to come back. We were able to hit the weight room. We were able to hit the boats. We were able to hit the ergs. Like, it was just hit the ground running as soon as we got back. There was never a moment that I thought, man, this completely sucks that we're back. It was so good to come back. So I'm glad that COVID didn't take it away from us.
They do it for their shared love to compete, the love for their team, and the love of their sport. Each look to what they most look forward to during their season, which still may or may not go ahead due to COVID. Yet with the mind of an athlete, they're ready to win the fight. Athlete 1, Corona 0, endgame.